You folks for joining. We're going to give people a few more minutes to trickle into the work group before we get started. All right. It looks like the number of folks trickling in is slowing down a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today for our first work group on CVRP for the fiscal year 2022-23 funding plan development. My name is Raquel Leon, and I am the staff lead over CVRP, as well as the lead for this year's update to the long-term plan for light-duty vehicles and clean transportation equity investments. I'm joined today by Lisa McCumber, manager over the funding plan, as well as the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project and Financing Assistance for Lower Income Consumers Program. I'm also joined today by the CVRP administrator, the Center for Sustainable Energy, or CSE, who will provide an update on CVRP projections. But before we dive into things, I do want to start off by apologizing for rescheduling this work group a few times. We were on track to have this meeting last month, but we wanted to make sure we had some additional time to fully analyze the potential impact of current Tesla vehicles being ineligible and what that could mean for CVRP. So again, we apologize for the inconvenience and any confusion that has caused. Again, thank you for your patience in making yourself available today to have this discussion with us. Before we get into the presentation, I do also want to go over some logistics for today's discussion. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. We anticipate a copy of the recording will be made available on the Low Carbon Transportation Investments and Air Quality Improvement Program meetings and workshops webpage in approximately 2 weeks. Materials for today's work group are available on the same webpage, and a link to these materials has been dropped in the Zoom chat. In addition, we will be leveraging Zoom's raised hand and Q&A box features to facilitate comments and questions. If you would like to submit comments or questions in writing, please use the Zoom Q&A feature, and we will address policy-related questions verbally for the benefit of all attendees. Please remember to state your name and affiliation when making a comment or asking a question. We ask that you hold your questions until the end today. We'll have a discussion period once we finish our presentations. You're also more than welcome to drop your questions in the Q&A box along the way so you don't forget them, and we will address them during the discussion period later on. If there are any Zoom interruptions for any reason, including malicious intent, we will immediately end today's meeting and send out another notice to reschedule. And lastly, we are unable to allow anonymous meeting participants for security reasons. So please make sure your name is clear on the Zoom platform. If you have called in, we will adjust your phone number and call on you if you raise your hand based on the last 4 digits of your number. Today, I will start off with a short introduction that includes background on the program and a brief update on the California ZEV market through Q1 of this year. I will then turn it over to the Center for Sustainable Energy to walk through updated CVRP projections. I will then cover some key takeaways and then open it up for discussion on potential program change considerations for CVRP to be included in the fiscal year 2022-23 funding plan for clean transportation incentives. And we'll close the discussion with information on next steps in our public process. As many of you know, Cvrp, which promotes clean vehicle adoption in California, offers rebates of up to $7,000 for the purchase or lease of new eligible zero-emission vehicles, including electric, plug-in hybrid electric, and fuel cell vehicles. Last year, Cvrp received a total allocation of $525 million, with $10 million of the allocation earmarked for the creation of an electric bicycle incentive program, and $515 million for Cbrp, with the intent to fund the program through fiscal year 2023-24. Last year's budget allocation also included a requirement for CARB to provide a plan to phase down the rebate based on ZEV sales numbers. A plan of phased-in changes was approved by the board last November, and the first set of changes, which was triggered by reaching 1 million ZEV sales in California, took effect on February 24th of this year. Those changes included a decrease in the income cap for standard rebate eligibility and a decrease in the Msrp cap to $45,000 for smaller vehicle classes. Larger vehicle classes, such as trucks, vans, and SUVs, are still subject to a $60,000 Msrp cap. Shortly after implementing the first set of changes this February, Tesla increased the base Msrp of the Model 3 and Model Y, putting both vehicles over the Cbrp Msrp cap, making them ineligible for the program. As we'll see in the next slide, Tesla vehicles make up a vast majority of electric vehicle purchases in California, so it's no surprise that they historically accounted for an equally large share of Cvrp demand. A second phase of changes is tentatively slated to go into effect in February 2023, triggered by having 1.25 million EV sales in California. The second phase of changes includes a second reduction in the income cap for standard rebate eligibility, removal of plug-in hybrid electric vehicles from Cvrp eligibility, and a modest reduction in the rebate amount across the board. In the approved proposal, the board directed staff to continue analyzing the ZEV market and updating Cvrp funding need projections to determine if this second phase of changes is indeed necessary to keep the program open through fiscal year 2023-24, and to provide an update with possible amendments to the plan in the upcoming funding plan based on this analysis. In today's public work group, we will be providing an update on California's ZEV market and Cvrp projections to begin discussion of what changes we could possibly make to Cvrp based on this information. The California Energy Commission recently updated the California ZEV sales dashboard to include data through Q1 of this year. Based on this update, there have been over 1.1 million cumulative light-duty ZEV sales to date. This includes over 81,000 ZEVs sold in Q1 of 2022 alone, making it the strongest quarter for ZEV sales to date. Tesla accounted for 78% of all battery electric vehicles sold in Q1 of 2022. And when comparing to new vehicle sales data from 2020, new ZEV sales experienced a higher percentage of growth than new light-duty internal combustion vehicle sales in 2021. The growth in ZEV sales has increased the light-duty ZEV market share from just over 12% at the end of 2021 to over 16% in March of 2022. It is encouraging to see the ZEV market continue to grow by leaps and bounds despite manufacturing and supply chain disruptions. With some of that initial framing in place, I'm now going to turn it over to Francis Alvarez and Jonathan Chengus with the Center for Sustainable Energy to walk us through some updated Cbrp funding projections.
Great. Thank you, Raquel. So I can take over from here. So the first slide we're going to review shows the current progress towards cumulative ZEV sales goals. And looking at the figure below, the solid black line represents the historical number of cumulative ZEV registrations in California from 2010 through October 2021. The secondary line, which is that dashed green line, represents the middle estimate of our forecast, which illustrates that we have nearly 1 million vehicles by 2023 and are on track for both 1.5 million by 2025 and then 5 million by 2030. And then I will mention, while the 1.5 million goal by 2025 seems optimistic, for the 2030 goal, we're exceeding that 5 million mark by 100,000 sales. Another thing to note about this forecast, it does take into consideration Tesla's ineligibility in the program. Yes. And then next slide, Raquel. And then so for our Cvrp projections methodology, I'm just going to go through and review some of the updates from our past discussion. So as far as methodology, it's still the same as we presented previously. We're currently using Facebook's profit forecast to produce our estimates. Some updates in terms of Cvrp rebate data. We're now spanning data from March 2010 all the way through February 2022 for our California ZEV registration data. That's being collected from March 2010 through October 2021. Some differences between last work group presentation is we now disaggregated Tesla and non-Tesla battery electric vehicles. And that's done just so we can have a better control of excluding some of those Tesla vehicles in future projections as well. Another thing to note about this collection of data is we're now collecting some of those post-program changes that Raquel mentioned earlier, so the Msrp cap and the income cap. Those came into effect February 24th, 2022. So we have a few days of that data. So that's something we'll keep an eye on in these next couple months as we collect more data. And then just to break down some of those past program changes that came into effect in February, I'm going to give you the numbers that we estimated based on snapshots of data from February 2021 to October 2021. So some of the different program changes that we included in our forecasts were the current lowering of the income cap, which we expected to have a 23% reduction in total applications. For the $45,000 Msrp cap, that's a little bit smaller in effect, only expecting to reduce applications by 1% or slightly lower. As for Tesla's Msrp ineligibility, we're expecting that to have a 70% reduction in BEV applications, or in terms of the full program, a 59% reduction overall. Some things that we didn't include in this forecast is we excluded future model releases. There's also many new manufacturers entering the ZEV space, but those are excluded in our forecast as well. We're also excluding future supply chain improvements, as well as those slated 2023 program changes, which were PHEV ineligibility, an additional reduction in the income cap, as well as a $250 decrease in rebate amount across all different rebates. And then to go a little bit more granular into some of those program changes and how we analyzed them, one thing with Tesla is all of those anticipated funds we expect to be free for other manufacturers and other brands. Initially, those 83 to 88% of those funds going to Tesla will become available over time, likely reducing program use initially, but normalizing over time as other products begin to fill that gap. And the way that we predicted Tesla is from their MSRP ineligibility, we're expecting them to gradually reduce demand from March 2022 through August 2022. And then after that, we expect them to be fully excluded from the program. So we're no longer forecasting Tesla individually. As for the income cap reduction, that's expected to have a uniform reduction in demand from March 2022 and onward for the remainder of the program. So just revisiting that September 22 update, demand is expected to increase as new models come to the market and overall supply returns to pre-2020 levels. And then now we start to look at those Cbrp demand estimates. So we're only looking at the estimates from March 2022 through June 2024. And it's broken down by two different Cbrp rebate categories. The first category being standard and DAC fleet increased rebates, which range anywhere from $9 million in demand to $39 million. For the lower income increased rebates, we predict that that's going to range anywhere from $6 million to $17 million. And then combining those two groups together, we have a partial estimated need, which ranges anywhere from 15 million to 56 million. And again, just to reiterate, some of the additional demand factors that we didn't consider are we exclude supply chain considerations. Those are absent from our projections. Also, any future model releases, those are also absent from our projections. And we also do not include any changes to the federal or state incentives or any regulation changes. However, we do think that CARB's advanced Clean Cars 2 regulation is anticipated to boost ZEV production.
Thank you, Francis. Before we do open it up for questions and discussion, I do want to note some key takeaways from what Francis just presented. So as the data has shown, the removal of Tesla vehicles from program eligibility does impact Cvrp funding projections. However, there is very minimal impact to the overall ZEV market, and we're still on track to meet our next 2 ZEV deployment goals, which is great news. This indicates that the first wave of EV adopters is well established and allows Cvrp to take the time now to pivot its focus to lower and middle income car buyers who need additional support to make that switch to electric. As Francis noted, these projections do not include upcoming ZEV model releases, which we know there will be many in the next couple of years. And based on projections, we will not only be able to shift the program's focus to consumers who need the most assistance, but also indicates that we will have sufficient funding to support these upcoming ZEV model releases. So really the important thing to note here is that these projections are a snapshot of what the market looks like right now. It's not taking anything future into account, such as new models, changes in federal incentives, or any other regulations affecting the ZEV market. So based on what we know and what we've heard today about the ZEV market and updated Cvrp projections, we do want to use our time today to discuss some possible program change considerations for Cvrp. These considerations include, but definitely are not limited to, foregoing the second phase of changes planned for next year, possibly including a charge card with every rebate issued. And if we were to do this, we'd like to get your input on what amount would be sufficient. Would it be $250, $500 more? So we'd definitely like your input on that. Increasing the rebate amount, and if so, by how much or to what amount? And then expanding pre-qualification statewide to allow low-income car buyers to apply for the rebate in advance of their purchase so that they could use the incentive at the point of purchase. So we'd like to get your thoughts today on these potential program changes, as well as get your input on any other changes we should be considering. In making changes to the program, we also want to make sure that we leave some funding on the table for future model releases. So we don't want to make too many drastic changes to the program at this point in time, but we do want to be responsive to what we're seeing with these projections and what we know the market looks like now. So we're going to open up the floor now for questions and comments and suggestions based on today's presentation. And if you would like to make a comment or ask a question, please use the webinar feature to raise your hand. For those using Zoom online, please click on the raise hand option on the Zoom navigation bar under the participants tab. For those using Zoom on a mobile application, please click on the raise hand option in the More tab. For those who are participating by telephone, please be sure to press #2 and we will call on you accordingly. And once your line is open, you can begin to speak. Again, please state your name and affiliation first before providing a comment or asking a question. And as always, you may also type your question into the question and answer box, and we will alternate between taking verbal questions and reading and responding to those in the Q&A box. So for purposes of the discussion, I'm going to go back one more slide so that way we can keep that up. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Aria Berliner, who will be managing our Q&A today.
Actually, Aria, I'm going to jump in really quick. We have a clarifying question that came in on the Q&A. To clear this out real quick, from Paul Hernandez with EBCE. The question is, with respect to the with respect to the $525 million through fiscal year 23-24, does the current available funding on the CSE portal, which shows approximately $361 million, account for the $525 million?
Yes. the quick answer is yes, that all of that funding has been put into the program and is reflected on that available funding ticker.
Thanks, Raquel, and thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone. When you're called on, please state your name and affiliation. First up, we have Anthony Bento. Anthony, I have unmuted your mic.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for the time to speak, and thank you for the presentation. My name is Anthony Bento. I'm from the California New Car Dealers Association. I think that the first item on these program change considerations, the not implementing the second phase of the changes in 2023, makes a lot of sense, certainly from the perspective of the dealers in the state of California. Continued programmatic changes to this program, as well as other rebate programs, create confusion among dealers as well as consumers. So I think we need to be very cautious and on making further changes. So if we can avoid making further programmatic changes in light of some of these developments that have been discussed and the available funding that is within this that's been allocated to this program, I think that would be a really positive benefit for consumers and dealers alike. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Anthony.
Next up, we have Eric Barnes. Eric, I have unmuted your mic.
Hi, Eric Barnes, Motorcycle Industry Council. I'm sorry if I missed this earlier, but would the proposed changes have any impact on motorcycles that are eligible for the program?
Any of these proposals at the moment would be either an increase in rebate amount or including a charge card with rebates issued or anything else that's brought to the table related to that.
Okay. But in terms of the qualifications and all of that, are they the same or different for motorcycles?
Correct. They are still the same as what's been in place, and the rebate amount remains at $750.
Okay.
There are no more raised hands as of right now. But there is a question in the Q&A box from James Greff. Are these slides available for download? James, they are. I will put I've posted a link in the chat, but I'll post a link here so you can. Oh, okay. I will post a link again in the chat. Oh, we have more hands. Eileen Tutt, I have unmuted your mic.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Eileen Tutt. I'm with the California Electric Transportation Coalition and really appreciate this presentation and also appreciate Raquel acknowledging that this workshop has been moved a few times because it was a little difficult given all of the changes that were happening. We really looked forward to hearing from you. So thank you. I understand totally why you had to. But thank you for just recognizing that. I agree with Anthony. We really cannot implement the second phase of changes in 2023. That doesn't make any sense. I would say that including a charge card with every rebate issue is sort of an inappropriate use of CVRP. I would prefer to see, since it's a fuel related benefit, I would prefer to see something like the LCFS program, this group coordinating with them, and perhaps something like that. I think the Clean Fuel Reward program has actually been more effective than the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project. And so something that addresses low income folks and in the context of the fuel side of the equation is probably best addressed through the LCFS. I do recognize that we have a lot, you're clearly going to be under subscribed for this program, which to me would suggest that in terms of additional suggestions, expanding to statewide pre-qualification, brilliant idea. I doubt you'll get any pushback on that. I don't really think increasing the rebate amount is a good use of the money. Rather, I would suggest that we go back to the income caps that were in place before phase one changes were made, because I understand that there are a lot of people who think the income caps were too high, but I can tell you that any changes to the income caps and the changes that were made were not based on data. The data very clearly shows that, 90% plus, and I think it was more like 95%, it was a huge number of people who received the rebate said it was very important, and that was under the previous income caps. I personally know people who are clearly middle class. In fact, the two examples that I know of are public servants who became ineligible when the income caps were changed and didn't buy an electric vehicle. And that was in part because they would have bought it with the incentive, but they're not going to without it. And so I think that, to be quite honest, as we move into 100% ZEV requirement, and we really need every single person, way more than 16%, to pick an electric vehicle, now is not the time to make it ineligible to a very large group of people. I think that 23% number you showed is low, who can afford a new car, but really have to make a choice between the car they know and love and a new technology. And so I just think this as we move towards 100%, which is a new requirement and one that will be codified here very soon, we need to include the previous income caps. So that would be my suggestion. And as you know, we're also working in the legislature on that. But I just want to say that I think it's really important to use this rebate to its best and fullest potential. And when you cut out a very large group of people who actually can afford a new car and who are not wealthy by California standards by any means, then that doesn't actually help the market. It harms the market, and it does create substantial confusion and actually frustration with the program. So anyway, appreciate the ability or the opportunity to provide input and the amazing work that CARB does and the staff does in a complicated time. So just want to say thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Eileen, and we'll go back and look at income caps and a way that we can better coordinate with CFR and LCFS and with the charge card comment. And so thank you again for those.
Next up, we have Chris Chavez. Chris, I've unmuted your mic.
Yes, this is Chris Chavez with Coalition for Clean Air, which is a member of the Charge Ahead California campaign. Thank you for this discussion. I know that we haven't had an opportunity to discuss internally some of these proposals, but I'll provide some comments on a general sense. I think as we've long advocated for, we think that the California's incentive programs need to focus on those that have the greatest barriers to clean transportation. It makes no sense to give money to where there is already money. So we would oppose rolling back income caps. We'd also, regarding the future income caps idea, I think that's something that we have to consider and look at where we are internally. But I do know that, in terms of our programs, we do want to make sure that we are targeting those that need the assistance the most of purchasing an electric vehicle. Regarding some of the other changes, it's, like I said, I think we need to have a little bit more discussion. Would certainly encourage CARB to engage with environmental and equity advocates in terms of some of these decisions, because that's ultimately who needs the most amount of help in purchasing an electric vehicle. I do recognize that there are other programs out there as well designed for low-income earners, but we really need to make sure that this program is reducing barriers as much as possible, and for those that face the most amount of barriers. But again, I think we would be concerned about rolling back the provisions and opposed to rolling back the provisions that were in the funding plan in 2021. And we would hope CARB continues in prioritizing low-income and disadvantaged communities. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Chris.
Next up, we have Ladonna Williams. Ladonna, I've unmuted your mic.
Yes, good afternoon, Ladonna Williams, all positives possible. I just wanted to find out, first of all, thank you for the slides because it gave us a chance to kind of look it over and understand a little bit more or be able to follow along a little bit better. But I believe I asked this question at a previous meeting and they were going to get back to us or let us know. I wanted to find out the breakdown of where the funding went as far as the ethnic breakdown, the percentages. And I think they said it did exist, but they were looking it up. And if not, if they didn't ask the question when the purchaser, bought the car, if they can tell us by area code, zip code, the percentages of where the funding went for the disadvantaged communities.
Ladonna, yes, and Jonathan, feel free to jump in here in just a sec. We are working on pulling together some information for you that goes across all of the programs, which is why we don't have it for you today. But Jonathan can speak to what we do have that's readily available for Cvrp. Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa, and thanks, Ladonna. We do look forward to having a further follow-up with you specific to Cvrp through the extensive consumer survey work that we have. We do have a pretty good read on some of the breakdown by different race and ethnicities, and that's public, and we can definitely walk you through some of that information. That survey work is pretty important to kind of refining and informing kind of our iterative approach to outreach, including not just the communities, but finding local partners. We currently have, I believe, 14 community-based organizations that assist us with implementing Cvrp, and in particular with kind of raising awareness of the program, primarily in lower income and disadvantaged communities almost exclusively. And so as we see gaps, we use that to help inform and to try and find additional partners. So we can walk through that data in detail. With regards to some zip code level data on the rebate statistics dashboards, there's a number of filters that kind of allow you to slice and dice where the rebates are going, both the increased rebate that has the 400% federal poverty level caps, so really targeting more of the lower income households and consumers, consistent with some of the other equity programs, as well as the base or standard rebate, which has the income caps that we've been talking about that were just lowered in February. And so that does allow for some granularity and some mapping of where are the dollars going. We also on the website have some information of at least pre-pandemic where outreach events were being conducted, where communities were trying to be reached with direct outreach. And as the pandemic subsides, hopefully, knock on wood, we do look to have not just CSE staff, but like I said, our CBO partners helping us engage again in person when that's safe and healthy to do so. So I do look forward to following up with some of the email threads, and we'll be happy to kind of do a deeper dive on the data. And I think maybe we can even have a work group or something like that to share that more broadly, because we've done a lot of work on the research side with regards to low and moderate income population, both who is participating in and who do we need to work and put more effort into reaching, who we're not getting currently.
Okay. And you mentioned it was available on the website, or are you guys preparing to put it on the website? Because I was going to say it was great to see the growth that took place and they had that chart. I was just wondering why it is that that information wasn't already posted for us to be able to look at it and see it.
Yeah, there's a tab. You got to kind of know where to find. There's a lot of data. That's the good news. And there's a section called Program Reports, which we try and have intuitive titles to the type of research work that's done. So I'm going to put the Program Reports link in particular, which will have kind of all the research we've done ever, I think, for the program available, which includes some of our more recent analysis into the LMI space. So I'll put that into the chat. I think I can do that. And then that will be a space look, and then I can I'll follow up with you directly.
Yeah, we can follow up later on it. Okay, okay, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Ladonna, for your questions and comments. I do want to go to the Q&A box really quick. We have a question from Jamie Krantz from the City of Paramount Public Works. Sorry if I missed it, but does CARB provide funding for cities to give rebates, or is it all individual?
So the funding for this program is goes directly to either the consumer, the individual purchasing the ZEV, or we provide rebates to public agencies, some business and rental car share fleets for them to purchase EVs for their business themselves. So this program doesn't provide money to cities or local governments to distribute the rebates, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Raquel. Next up, we have Mark Roost. Mark, I have unmuted your mic.
Thank you. Mark Roost with Sustainable Energy, Inc. And I guess the thing that I'd like to focus on is that we're going to need lots of charging stations, and we're going to need lots of solar to which can be put in faster than upgrading substations and upgrading the distribution network, and which gives a lot of benefit to the owners of the building and the vehicles, because that reduces the amount that they have to purchase later, as does getting an electric vehicle with a motor that lasts 1 million miles. I guess the thing that I'd like to ask is that if you're looking forward more than a year or so, that in terms of this particular allocation, that you try to frame it in such a way that you can expand rapidly when new technology comes on the market that is lower in cost and that is more accessible to distributed generation and distributed storage and charging. And I can explain that more if you want, but that's the basic thought.
Thank you, Mark, for your comments.
You're welcome.
Next up, we have Susan Carpenter. Susan, I've unmuted your mic.
Great, thank you. So I just wanted to know exactly what is this charge card? How would that work? What kind of amount would be included? And can you talk about different increased rebate amounts that you're considering?
So for the charge card, it would be a preloaded card that the individual could use at certain charging stations, usually those that are public. And Lisa can chime in because our other programs do this at the moment, the financing assistance program, as well as Clean Cars for All. And we would like your input on what that amount could be if we were to do something like that. But what we would do is include that preloaded charge card with every rebate that's issued once this change was in place. And in terms of the increased rebate amount, we kind of have that open on the table, and we would like your input on, what folks would like to see, or what we should be looking at or considering going forward.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm media, so I can't really give input.
I'm sorry, Susan, what did you say?
I said I'm media, so I can't really give input. I'm just looking for your thoughts on that. So, or anybody else's thoughts on the call. Yeah.
Great. If you wouldn't mind to reaching out to our public affairs office, I'm sure that they would love to chat with you more. But we do offer like Raquel said, we do offer charge cards already with a number of our vehicle purchase incentive programs, including the financing assistance program and the Clean Cars for All program. Right now, consumers that qualify to participate in those programs can receive a level 2 charger if they have the capability to have that installed at their residence. And if not, they can get a portable charger and a $500 charge card to kind of supplement what they can't do at their residence. And so this is just one of those ideas we put on the table, we wanted to get input on today. We don't have a specific agenda with it other than getting everybody's feedback.
Great, thank you.
And if, maybe just to provide some context as folks are considering these changes, as was presented by Francis, between the change in the income cap that went into effect, which we saw was anticipated to have a 23% reduction in app volume, and now Tesla coming out, which is an even larger bit, we are anticipating like an 83 to 80% reduction in application volume. And just so we're all kind of on the same page, we don't anticipate that if you did restore the income caps, that would handle that kind of first 23% that we saw, but we would still have that reduced volume. And so the magnitude of where we've always been with the program, where we thought we were, and the combination, and really the Tesla MSRP cap ineligibility really changing the bits. When we've approached these conversations in the past, it's always been about a funding limitation, and that's not really where we're at. So expanding pre-qualification statewide doesn't pencil out to have a significant impact on funding demand. It's just probably going to make it a little bit easier for a lot of folks to access. We know point of purchase is a desirable option when getting incentives. So just so that we're all thinking about this, if you increase the rebate amount by $500, I haven't run the numbers yet with the team, but can speak pretty confidently that that's not going to drain the coffers, just because without the Tesla volume, which has really been driving demand for the program since the launch of the Model 3 in 2018, the other automakers have just not had anywhere close to as significant effect on program demand. There hasn't been anything like the Model 3 and then the Model X and Model Y comparable. And so while there have been some new releases that are exciting and some new model entrants, which are going to attract more folks to it, the volume of any of those models has been somewhat low. Part of that could be in good deal because of supply chain constraints, but that's marketed to exist for at least probably another, I don't know if someone wants to take a stab at it, but we're not expecting anything significant to change on supply chain for another 10, maybe 12 months based on the market data that we're seeing. If someone has something new, it'd be great to hear. So there is a situation here where the funding demand has gone way down, and we have an opportunity to kind of explore what does that mean. So just providing some color commentary there. Happy to explain further if there's more specific questions.
Thank you, Jonathan. We have a few questions in the Q&A box. The first is from David Thornton. Does this rebate program also apply for commercial vehicles such as a tour bus?
Yeah, so this program only applies to light duty vehicles. We do have programs that address medium and heavy duty vehicles, the main one being Cvrp, and we can drop a link to that program into the chat.
We then have another question from Mark Soroki. You mentioned a portable charger and a $500 card. What is a portable charger? A level 1 convenience cord?
So no, there are portable chargers that are available that plug in directly to a 110 outlet that a consumer could keep, say, in the back of their car when they're moving about, and it allows it to process the power so that the car can charge on it. And it comes with the applicable hookups to be able to, go from any particular unit to the car. So we do offer those right now within some of our purchase incentive programs, but not currently with this program.
Thank you. And then Anthony Bento writes, I agree with Jonathan on vehicle supply. Supply issues seem probable through at least mid-2023. Thank you, Anthony, for your comments. Our next raised hand is Mark Roost. Mark, I've unmuted your mic.
Thank you very much. New comment, Mark Roost with Sustainable Energy, Inc. And the gentleman that was just talking a minute ago said something that surprised me, that supply chain issues are reducing the demand for your funding. And if that is the case, then I would like to ask for help in finding some discretionary funding that could be used to help us with non-dilutive funding to get our batteries and solar energy system going, and non-dilutive because we need to not put it into the venture capital funds at all, because of the oil interests wanting to buy stuff up and shut it down as they did in the 80s. So we could accelerate that because we're using a US-based supply chain, and we will be using that, and it'll sidestep the problems. It'll also sidestep the costs of materials for both batteries and solar.
Mark, for your comments. And just to respond to the first part of your comment about the supply chain impacting the program, and that's because there aren't vehicles out there for people to purchase. And as soon as that gets back up to where it was pre-2020, we do anticipate the demand for the program to definitely ramp back up.
Right. So what I'm saying is that the reason for the backup in the vehicles is the backup. Well, there's stuff related to the electronics, but there's also the issues with the batteries, and there's also the issues with the availability of solar powered charging. And so we're working on solutions to both of those.
Great. Well, thank you again for your comments.
Thank you. Bye.
We have no more raised hands, and it doesn't look like there are any questions in the Q&A box.
Well, thank you, Aria. While people are still either thinking things over, I do want to kind of touch on a separate but related note here. So as we've kind of seen today, as Tesla's vehicles became ineligible for the program, that definitely decreased program demand. But that's not to say they could put out a vehicle that meets our MSRP cap and come back into the program. And what we do want to discuss today is implementing a policy for manufacturers who change the MSRP mid-model year and are removed from the program. We'd like to set a policy that keeps those vehicles out of the program for a set time, be it until the next model year or a set number of months, to kind of limit that yo-yo effect on the program and really decrease the confusion for consumers on what's eligible. So I would like to get kind of your input on implementing a policy like that for CVRP.
Eileen Tutt, I have unmuted your mic.
Hi, and I'm sorry, this is more of a clarification question for Raquel. So you're saying that, like, if Tesla introduces a model that is under the income cap, then they would still not be allowed in the program for some period of time? Is that what you're suggesting? I mean, I have no comment on it, I'm just trying to clarify what you're...
So it would be model specific. So for example, the Model 3 is over the $45,000 MSRP cap. If they were to introduce a trim level that was under that 45K, then technically the Model 3 is eligible again for the program. And so I think it would definitely be based on model, but if Tesla were to introduce a different model, a newer model, or any other manufacturer that is under the income cap, I'm sorry, the MSRP cap, then they would be back into the program for that specific model. Does that make sense? I know it's a little bit.
It does make sense. I guess what I would just say here is I think we need to think about things that actually improve the program and make it more attractive to consumers. And not that I mean, I understand the desire to not, I mean, and it actually makes sense to me to try to prevent automakers from doing MSRP cap or MSRP changes just randomly in order to get in or out of the program. That seems like a bad idea, but we don't have a comment on that. But I think the other changes that you're thinking about are more in line with how do we make this program more effective and stronger. And so our comments are focused on that. I'm not sure this would make the program, it almost seems too early to even think of it. It's like a one-time thing that I don't know that it'll be a pervasive problem, but I do think the other changes that you're recommending and that have been discussed here are more focused on how do we make this program effective. And Jonathan talked about it too, that we have this money and we aren't going to run out, which is usually the discussion we're having. So I guess we should all really celebrate. So how do we make this program as effective as possible? And from our perspective, I'm not sure we think like using the money as fast as possible is the most effective ways to make changes. But we do think we really are troubled by this kind of push and pull between, like somehow pitting low-income people against middle-income people. And I think you can prioritize programs for a low and moderate income and in communities of color, particularly African-American communities, areas like we can prioritize those communities without saying, without acting like we have to eliminate middle class, because I think ideally we all want, the low income Californians to become middle class. And so we don't, I just thought I am challenged, I'm finding challenges with this contention that somehow, middle income people are in a contest for money with low. I think you can prioritize low income communities and communities of color and also support middle income car buyers that are making a choice between which car they choose at a time when the state has really ramped up its goals. We don't have a 5 million goal anymore. We have a 30 million goal. That changes everything. So that's kind of where my brain goes. It goes to how do we make this program as effective as possible, not to accelerate the market and pick up people who we don't have yet. And that to me, that's why we're suggesting reverting the income caps, because we feel like there's a lot of people in that income bracket, middle income, that can afford a new car, but that have not made that choice. And I also think the 16% is probably a blip. I think it will continue to go up, but I think that is kind of a blip based on the Tesla pullout, like when Model 3 was introduced. I don't see that as, I hope it does, but I don't think we can count on that being like some sort of trend. And that's why we suggest that what we need to do is capture these people who are on the fence. And we need to, while doing that, while also really making sure that we double down in supporting priority communities.
So much for those comments, Eileen.
I want to add, one thing to the question that Raquel asked about how we do handle mid-year changes. Recognizing that the bulk of the questions that we do try to focus on in here are the larger policy questions. There are day-to-day impacts that impact the consumers, and that's why this particular question got put on the table, because as we're for the first time ever dealing with a mid-model year change. We are seeing significant confusion from consumers and how this is going to play out over the next couple of months. And implementation, while the policy and finding the ways to make sure that the program continues to be effective and is supporting consumers in the right ways, and that is our number one goal. When we have opportunities to talk with you guys about these things, asking some of the more tedious questions are also really important to us. And so getting feedback from you guys, even on things like how should we handle model year changes, even if it doesn't happen very often, getting a sense from you on what you think would make the most sense. Again, trying to think from the consumer first standpoint, we'd like that input. And so kind of putting that on the table, it helps us out in knowing what your preferences are. With that though, too, I've got several questions that have come in the Q&A box. So I'm going to run through a few of these right now. First, from Adriana Carrillo, missed the first part of Jamie Kranz's question. Do we provide funding for local governments such as counties to distribute rebates? No, we do not. This program, as Raquel had mentioned, really is, we run through a single administrator that issues rebates to consumers. Local entities are eligible to receive rebates for their fleet vehicles, but not to then redistribute out to consumers. Question from Lauren Dunlap, will the recording for this be available to listen to later? Yes, it will. It will be posted on the website within the next 2 weeks or so. And then from Ladonna Williams, can you please explain acronyms like Cvrp or PHEV for newly engaged community members to better understand? Thank you very much, Ladonna. I appreciate that comment. We do get kind of caught up in, since we live and breathe this every day, we often forget to spell out those acronyms. So yes, Cvrp, Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, PHEV, a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. And going forward, folks, if we do use an acronym, let's do our best to make sure we're spelling those out. And last, from Olivia Seidman, apologies if I missed this, but is Cvrp program coordinating with other government agencies to ensure that charging and fueling infrastructure is available in DACs in disadvantaged communities and other low-income communities and areas where households are using these incentives? The short answer to that is yes, absolutely. We work very closely with the Energy Commission and with other local utilities that are running charging programs. But I'll open it up to anybody else who's here that does work more intimately in that space.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. The Center for Sustainable Energy is also the administrator of the Energy Commission's light duty EV charging infrastructure program, known as CALI-VIP, the California Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Project. And so we do closely coordinate as much as we can implementation. There are different decision-making bodies there, but when it comes to, again, the community partners we work with are phenomenal at trying to help folks understand and then inform back. It's not just the community voice to participants about the programs that are available, but then it's bringing that back. There's a lot of folks that we work with that try and help both their resources board through their public process as well as the Energy Commission connect the dots. I will be the first to acknowledge there's always, I think, room for improvement, but yes, we do strive to implement and cross-promote the vehicle and the infrastructure together because especially for low and moderate income households that do not live in single family homes, that do not have access to charging, folks in apartment complexes and multi-unit dwellings, an incentive for a vehicle alone is usually insufficient to provide access to actually utilizing an electric vehicle. And so we need to solve both sides of that. And so the state is attempting to do so. And I think there is a second block grant coming forward from the Energy Commission, next iteration of the infrastructure program that's going to try and emphasize investment in disadvantaged communities, not just in disadvantaged communities, but in locations and sites that are usable by the low-income residents. And so that is definitely on everybody's heart and mind. There are other programs as well, AB 617 and other efforts that are trying to address pollution from transportation and other sources that we also coordinate with. So again, I can't stress enough the importance of community-based organizations as being kind of the connective tissue between these programs and the communities they represent. They definitely play a critical role in helping make all of that happen. So I'm happy to talk more about CALI-VIP and connect people with those resources if they are so interested.
Thank you, Jonathan. Next up, we have Leah Collin. Leah, I have unmuted your mic.
Sorry, that was an accident.
All right. Next up, we have Chris Chavez. Chris, I've unmuted your mic.
Yes, this is Chris Chavez with Coalition for Clean Air. I just do want to clarify that we're not opposed to middle income folks being in the program. I think it's a question of where you define middle income as being at. Currently looking at the income caps for the program at $135,000 for single filers, $200,000 for joint filers. That's debatable whether that's considered middle income. I know that there's variations in different parts of the state, but ultimately, considering the median household income is significantly lower than that. I think that there are some questions as far as what is considered middle income here. We would hope that would focus on the folks that truly do need assistance in purchasing an electric vehicle. So just wanted to clarify that and make sure that we're not, we don't frame it as a low income versus middle income issue either. And certainly support and have historically supported increased rebates for LMI, low to moderate income participants as well in the past. So we are certainly not opposed to middle income folks participating.
Thank you for your comments, Chris.
All right, we've got a couple more questions that have come in the Q&A box. The first from Beverly Deshow. Does the program check for large lump sum incomes when checking income? Someone was recently asking about incentives whose income has a job that pays, his job is low, but it got a huge sum of money from a relative dying. Doesn't seem fair to those without such resources. That's a great question, Beverly. We, we focus on, while it is gross, while we are looking at gross income, the best way that we are able to do that across all of our programs is to look at what is reported as gross income on your taxes. And so if that is captured within your tax documentation, then we will be able to see it. There are rare instances in which we do, with some consumers, have to look a little bit deeper at painting an income picture. But it is relatively rare when we do that. So again, if it's something that you have to ultimately show on your taxes, then we would see that and that would be captured. And then a question from Paul H. from EBCE again, asking about, with respect to the charge cards, what's the anticipated amount per vehicle? And would this come from the Cvrp budget directly? Again, this is just a concept that we put on the table for input. And I think, we've gotten some decent input today. The idea would be that it would be paid out of this pot, and it could be any amount. We're looking for input on that too, something like 500. I think I misspoke earlier and said 500 for the other programs, and I believe we actually offer up to $1,000 in the other programs. So my apologies for that. But yeah, again, it's just one of those concepts to put on the table. We have been told for years, making sure that we're coupling the vehicle incentives with the charging is something that's really important. And again, we do partner with and work with our other agencies that provide those incentives and provide the charging outreach. And we just wanted to put this concept on the table to get feedback today to see how folks felt about it. And Q&A box is clear. Do we have any hands, Aria?
We do not.
Lisa, can I just provide a couple more kind of food for thought things as people are considering program change decisions and such? Is, some of the other things that we look at as we explore kind of market policy technology drivers is what's going on with the federal tax credit. I'm so optimistic earlier on that maybe there was going to be reinvestment, recommitment at the federal level, potentially an expansion and welcoming others like Tesla and GM back into the program, which would have had a significant impact potentially on who can afford an EV, especially as Chris noted, some folks that are arguably above the middle income designation. But with that not looking likely now, and other automakers approaching their respective quotas for the federal tax credit, we're going to see more OEMs not being eligible, and that raises some questions then about, okay, what is the state's role, and just something for folks to kind of think about. It's sensitive to the idea of it's important to calibrate the program to market and policy technology changes, but not also sensitive to not doing that every few months, right? That does create some challenges for dealers and such. So just trying to look at some of the longer term trends. Supply chain's not going away anytime soon. Okay, the rebate amounts and how they align with some of the other programs, the equity component of Cvrp and how does it work with others is something that's probably worth kind of talking about. The inflation and what we're seeing, the cost of buying groceries and the cost of paying rent, all these other costs are also going up for low and moderate income families, does that factor into discussions about the rebate amount that have been going down versus kind of adjusting for inflation? And what do we want to do with that? So I think that there's, in addition to the program itself, these kind of macroeconomic trends that are having impacts on folks and potentially disproportionately so on folks on the lower end, the comments really resonate, I think, with myself and with CSE about focusing on those that are in greatest need of assistance in order to get into an EV. That feels like very consistent with the policy platform, the governor, the legislature, that CARB has historically kind of driven towards as well. So those are just kind of some additional thoughts as folks do provide their comments and feedback, and hopefully we'll get some more follow-up. I'm sure that will be an option. There's just a lot going on in this space, a lot of good stuff. And it is, I think, as Eileen noted, a welcome change where we have some available funding, and now we get to have a far more positive story and conversation, which is how can we most effectively put the dollars to work and design the program to meet the state's both vehicle adoption goals, but also its strong and enduring commitment to equity. And so as those things, proposals come in, we do look forward to kind of building some new scenarios and sharing more data to help understand what the magnitude of some of those changes would be. So just open invitation, please let us hear, just echoing Lisa's comments about share, and then we can build.
Thank you, Jonathan. It seems to have quieted down on raise hands and questions. I'm going to go into just some next steps before we close out here. So again, we will take the input that we've received today and analyze various program change scenarios. We may hold a second public work group on the Cvrp in the coming weeks. A draft proposal will be released in advance of the second public workshop on the whole funding plan for clean transportation incentives, which is tentatively planned for mid-July. And then our final proposal will be included in the fiscal year 2022-23 funding plan for clean transportation incentives, which will be heard before the board in November of this year. And I know that we threw a lot at you today, and there's, I'm sure, more that you're still thinking about. So I do want to provide our contact information. So if you have any remaining questions or would like to provide additional suggestions once you've had some time to digest today's discussion, please feel free to reach out to me or Lisa. And if you'd like to continue to be involved in the public process surrounding the funding plan, I definitely encourage you to subscribe to our Gov Delivery emails at the link that's included in the presentation. And then before I close out, last call for raised hands and Q&A.
There are no raised hands or any questions in the Q&A box.
Thank you, Aria. All right, thank you everyone for participating today. Again, a recording will be posted to our website in the coming weeks, and we look forward to continued discussion with you. Have a great day.